My name is Famlala Coker. I am a Nigerian American metalsmith, and currently I live in New Paltz, New York. I'm getting my MFA in metal at SUNY New Paltz, and I'm in my apartment right now, wearing my big glasses and my one of my favorite sweaters, and behind me I have my plants and a shoe rack and some gemstones that I picked up from Tucson. I have a shelf of metal that is actually kind of empty right now, so it's not really doing anything. And then I also have my books right here. Actually, you can see one of them says Africa Adorned. It's actually a pretty nostalgic book for me. I grew up reading it and being fascinated by all the different um, tribes and people that live in Africa. So my view of Africa as a kid was always so expansive and diverse, and that's why I decided to keep that book and lug it around with me everywhere because it's gigantic and heavy. I have actually pivoted quite a few times in my career as a metalsmith. I started out in undergrad. My freshman year, the very first semester, I took an intro to metalsmithing class, and I immediately fell in love with it. And it was just one of those things that connected as soon as I touched it. So I started just trying to find ways or of sticking with that material and finding ways of taking as many classes as I could. Even though I was technically a sculpture BFA, I felt like metal was always my focus. And so I graduated and realized that I didn't have a studio. I mean, I had some tools, but they were very basic. And then I decided to go into making jewelry, but instead of making it out of metal, I decided to make it out of polymer clay. And so I was making miniature food jewelry for a long time. And in between that, I was also working at a hunting decoy place where we made um, duck decoys and like basically all waterfowl. And then they're also like going into making turkey decoys and all of these weird things. It was not my favorite environment to work in, but the research that we did and just learning how to make molds and working with plastic and working with a different material, that was really great for me. I just love working with different materials and I love process, so that was great. Um, I've also tried my hand at blacksmithing. Um, I would not say that I'm good at it, but I think I'm still somewhere in between the basic and intermediate level. Um, and I've somewhere along the lines in the last decade, I decided that I was going to go back to working with metal again. And so I started doing some fine jewelry. I was interested in tool making. And basically, like all of the, if I can work with metal in any way, I'll probably try it. Um, and I'm currently doing work that's sort of similar to what I was doing in undergrad. So it's more sculptural, but I'm also using newer processes to me, like electroforming. I'm uh, doing a lot more large scale fabrication, which I love. And I'm also doing some stone carving. So I'm working with um, soft stones like alabaster and soapstone and trying to incorporate that into the metalwork as well. So, and I love woodworking as well. So it's just a mix of things. For me, queerness is something that I mean, it's something that I've just recently accepted for myself. So I would say it's largely personal, um, but it's also, I mean, I think it is inherently political. Uh, So I don't think that's something that I can avoid, even if I wanted to. Um, but it's also conceptual, especially when it relates to my work. Um, but yeah, like as a personal experience, it's the people that I surround myself with, and how we interact with each other and move through the world. I feel like I've always been queer. I just never had the words for it. And I think that more recently, as we're connecting more with each other and being more open with these conversations, I think that more people are realizing that it's not a strange thing, you know? Um, and that is for me what I am accepting. It's not just about sexuality, it's not just about who I'm in a relationship with. And, you know, even though there is some aspect of it that's for me, but just mainly it's about how I move through the world and how I process information and things like that. For me, queer metal is definitely uh, it's a spiritual thing for me. It's a way that I connect with my history and my heritage, the my culture. I come from a long line of people who have made things out of metal for centuries, and just knowing that is really powerful for me. I mean, being in the studio and just thinking about how I got into metal, where I just touched it and I instantly knew that that's what I wanted to work with for the rest of my life. I feel like I'd never had any experience like that before, especially with art, because I come from a family of artists. My dad's a painter, my mom's a textile artist, and two of my brothers are illustrators and animators. And so I was never very good at any of those things. And so I just felt like I was disconnected from my family. I was disconnected from actually being an artist, even though I knew I wanted to do that. Uh, and that moment when I touched the metal and knew that I wanted to do it for the rest of my life was really powerful. So if I can go into the studio and just melt some metal around and pour it into a mold and just feel that, like feel those vibrations within me and connect with the material, then that's really what I'm excited about. Um, I think just being aware of the intersection of queerness and metal makes it an even more powerful experience. So
My name is Annie Cole Arthur. I am a 27-year-old cis white female. Got a short brown haircut, and I'm rocking my Society of Inclusive Blacksmiths t-shirt. I'm sitting in my kitchen and doing a little interview. So I grew up in middle and high school doing a lot of woodworking classes. And in high school, I fell in love with darkroom photography, 35 millimeter film, black and white, and just really loved the very tactical, but also kind of scientific and artistic bits of both of those things, of woodwork and of darkroom photography. Um, and kind of thought of myself as an artist, and got very in my head about it. And I decided when I graduated high school that I was just going to go and be an artist and figure out what that meant. And so naturally I ended up working a minimum wage job, dead end, as a cook at a restaurant, and I had no time or energy for art. And in that year after I graduated high school, I quickly realized that that wasn't for me, that I needed a bit more direction. Um, and I had kind of started to think about metal as a medium, and um, wanted to understand more about how metal objects were made, how they were formed, cut, welded, etc. Um, and then, like what that meant as far as like how you could take a design of something in metal. Um, so I found the word blacksmith. I didn't know what that meant, but I decided I wanted to be it. So I started doing some research and I found the American College of the Building Arts in Charleston, South Carolina. Um, and so I decided I was going to be a blacksmith. I was going to go to the American College of the Building Arts and spend the rest of my life as a blacksmith. So I excitedly told my parents that, and they looked at me like I was crazy. They're like, "You don't even know what this means." Um, and so they said, "Okay, you need to go take a lesson. We'll find somebody local and make sure you actually like this before we go paying, tens and tens of thousands of dollars for you to go to college and study this." And so we found a local lady who did a lot of sculptural work and stuff like that. Fixed a lot of her own farm equipment. She had started as a farrier as well, so she kind of did a little bit of everything. Um, and she only lived about 45 minutes away, so I took a few lessons from her, and immediately just fell in love with it. The welding, the grinding, even the forging, all of it, just every aspect was fascinating and new, and just felt like it all had so much potential. Um, so I convinced my parents, and I dove in head first and went to the American College of the Building Arts. Um, and at that time, through high school, I had not been a good student at all. I kind of slid by and did all right, but never did homework, didn't bother with any stuff like that. So I didn't make good grades, even though I was, a relatively intelligent person. I didn't make the grades that reflected that. Um, and so when I went to ACBA, I dove in and really immersed myself in it, and I finally found what it meant to be passionate about something, and that was, the taking metal and creating these useful objects. And so the program I took was in forged architectural ironwork. So all of my training was in making functional architectural items, because it was a building arts college. So that was what everything was focused around. We didn't really do anything sculptural or artistic. We honestly didn't even do a whole lot of design until our third and fourth years of the program. We were mostly just making reproductions and stuff like that. Um, my professor for my first 2 years, Richard Guthrie, was a great man. He had worked for 40 years at Colonial Williamsburg, so he was very intense about, like, you do it the old way. If you spend 5 minutes at the anvil, it'll save you, hours at the bench. If you do it right the traditional way and you know how to do it, you get your skills to that point where you can do it and finish it on the anvil, you'll get it done way faster and way better than anyone using modern techniques. So I really had this traditional, almost elitist kind of rhetoric just beat into me. Um, and I really took a lot of it to heart, and really have pushed myself to lean a lot on traditional methods. It's given me a real love as well for traditional joinery. So one of the things I really love is, small furniture items that use traditional joinery, things that you would see in timber framed buildings, or a lot of Japanese architecture uses a lot of that kind of stuff. The mortises and tenons and wedges and all the really uh, confusing and complicated joints that are very beautiful but also functional. And so that's really what I have fallen in love with in the field of blacksmithing. Um, and so after I graduated college, I began working for Robert Thomas Iron Design, and was, stayed in that architectural world of gates, railings, fireplace, screens and tools and all that sort of stuff. And then our shop ended up being um, shop neighbors with a cast iron company in Charleston that does um, high-end cast iron pans and cookware, um, called smithy ironware. And so my boss started talking with their boss, and eventually they decided, like, we should do a little collaboration. So we decided, or they decided, that they were going to do just a limited run of 100 12-inch carbon steel hand forged skillets. And because I just kind of did whatever job my boss handed to me, that job got handed to me of, make 100 of these skillets. And I remember just laughing in his face. I was like, this is never going to take off. People aren't going to want to buy these. Like, these things are handmade, high end. Like, we're going to have to sell them at such crazy prices. No one's going to want this. Like, this is not going to take off. And before I even finished making the 100 pans, they had all sold. Um, and since then, um, I now have a team of 8 people that work under me, and we have 4 products that we make with Smithy, and I run that portion of our business. And I've, designed everything from, at the tooling, the processes, the shop layout, how we do what we do. Um, my boss Robert, he does most of the design of the actual products themselves, but then I kind of work with him on that of, like, yes, this is great design, but how do we repeat it thousands of times? And so that this repetitive work in this high-end carbon steel cookware has really consumed my life for the last 3 years now. And there's no end in sight. Smithy has lined up products for us to continue releasing for the next several years, and there's a lot of growth there, and so I get the pleasure of taking in new people, and people who have little to no experience in any kind of metal work, and um, teaching them what it is I do and what we do. And it's fun to be the only woman, the only queer person in the shop, amongst uh, right now entirely straight white guys. And I get to point the fingers and tell them what to do. And I'm the one with the breadth of knowledge, and it feels like a very cool and powerful place for me to be as a queer person. Queerness to me is kind of just the umbrella term that I use to describe who I am. Um, in the kind of more typical boxes that we put people in, I identify as female. I use she/her pronouns. I'm a cis person as well, um, cisgender person as well. I'm, somewhere between a lesbian and asexual. I don't really know. But I love the word queer. Queer is a word that for a long time was, a slur against people in the LGBT community, and was a very harmful word. And, in the time that I have come out to the world and to myself as a queer person, we've really begun to reclaim the word queer and celebrate that, and to make it our own. And I really love the word because, kind of in its origins, it really just means kind of like weird or abnormal or different. Um, and that's kind of how I've always felt. And I like using it in a way um, that it's like a word I'm proud to use, not like it's some label someone has stuck on me, but rather it's a label I've stuck on myself. Um, and I like the ambiguity to it. I don't really know what my sexuality is. I'm somewhat asexual, and like maybe a lot of that has to do with my conservative Christian upbringing. And maybe some of that is just the way that I'm wired as a person. I sometimes use the word lesbian because my partner is also a cisgender female. And, you know, uh, she's wonderful. She's the love of my life. We've been together for over 8 years now. We met in high school, um, even looking back before her, which she and I came out together. Um, so she's the first woman I've been with. I'm the first woman she's been with. Um, and we kind of just came out as a couple. Neither of us came out as lesbian or bisexual, anything like that. We just came out as we're dating, whatever that means. We're dating. um but looking back, I've known since as early as I have memories that like I'm different. Whatever this word lesbian is, like something about that rings true to me. I don't know why, but I know it does. um and looking back, I can attribute a lot of my like really really close friends when I was in elementary or middle school. I'm like, oh, no, I definitely had a crush on them. Like that's what that was. That's not how most people feel about like their best friends. It's like, oh no, that was a crush. And I didn't know it because I was in this conservative Christian bubble of, you know, pray the gay away, love the sinner, hate the sin. All these, phrases that I grew up preaching to myself because I was like, this is not and cannot be who I am because this is unacceptable. um, and yeah, so I mean, there's always been that um, queerness about me, whatever it was. And then if so that's kind of all along the lines of like sexuality and attraction and that sort of thing. But then I mean, even in gender, like um growing up, I always wanted to hang out with the boys. I always wanted to be one of the guys. I remember my senior year of high school just crying to my mom because like all my friends were going on this spring break trip to the beach and I wasn't allowed to go because I was the only girl in my friend group. And again, in the conservative Christian world I grew up in, like boys and girls don't do overnight trips together. Like, that wasn't okay. And so um, but just always thinking like I'm one of the guys. I've always been one of the guys, but also like I am a female and I take pride in that. And so the more I kind of start to reflect on that, I'm like, I don't know what my gender is. My gender is queer. My sexuality is queer. I am queer because I'm Annie. Whatever the hell that means, I'm Annie. Um, Growing up as a kid, I always got mistaken as a guy. People called me he. People thought that I was my dad's son. Well, turns out my dad only has 3 daughters, no sons. So I was the son my dad never had, I guess. Um, I don't think I wore a shirt till I was 8 years old. Like I just walked around topless because it was like, this is like, this is just what you do. This is life. So I've always just been like somewhere in between and outside of gender. I've never used the words agender or non-binary or anything like that. It just never felt quite right to me. I've never used he, him, or they, them pronouns. Again, just never really like felt right to me. Probably just because I was raised as identifying as female, using she, her pronouns, and like it's kind of the point where like I've just stopped correcting people if they misgender me because I don't really know what it means to be properly gendered living life as me. It's just something that um, I think I've just given up the importance of that label as I've begun to accept myself for who I am, um, which is just queer. So the intersection of queerness and metal is really kind of the intersection where I'm living my life. I find those two things to be my biggest defining factors. I'm a queer person and I'm a blacksmith. Um, and both of those things were hard things for me to find in life. Um, it took me a while to get to those things and to really find a place that I belonged. Um, and a lot of these things have only recently begun to really dig into and sink my teeth into. And a lot of that is due to the Society of Inclusive Blacksmiths, started by, I believe, 11 women in the United States, but I believe there were some international folks in there as well. And just really doing the work that needs to be done, to open the door up, to take down the barriers, for any minority or intersectionality of minorities, of folks who want to get into the world of metal. And I think that that is, some of the most noble work. And I look at that and I think that, like, if I had had queer role models, if I had had, metalworking role models in my life, if I had had queer metalworking role models in my life, maybe it wouldn't have been so hard or so challenging or painful to figure out who it is that I am, the person that I'm living as today. Maybe it would have felt more like, being welcomed home, being embraced by a family, rather than like walking into the lion's den not knowing what to expect, which is one of the really hard things. At least I can't speak to anything beyond my experience, but in America, walking into a blacksmithing conference, it's hard to find the women there who aren't just the wife of somebody, or there to sell something or cook the food or clean up or whatever. It's hard to find other women or other queer people, or even just people of color who are there and like are doing blacksmithing, doing metalworking. um, and it's something that I really feel like needs to be more visible. We're out here, we're doing the thing. And it shouldn't be this like special thing. I've had a lot of folks approach me, interview me, ask me all these questions about like, oh, like, what is it like being a woman working in a man's world? Or like, you know, you're a young person working in an older man's world, all this stuff. And I'm just like, can't I just be a person who's good at what I'm doing? Like, does it matter what my genitalia is, what the color of my skin is, what my age is, what my body size and abilities are? None of it matters. Like, I am a human being and I'm making some cool shit out of metal. I'm making some cool stuff out of metal. Um, and like, it's just one of those things of like, I don't want to be a good queer blacksmith. I don't want to be a good female blacksmith. I don't want to be a good young blacksmith. I don't want to be a good professional blacksmith. I don't want to be a good architectural blacksmith. I want to be a good blacksmith, period. Full stop. Like, there shouldn't be anything special about me because I am a female or because I'm queer or any of that. Like, nothing of that should be special. It should be normal and good. And, it shouldn't, when you Google blacksmith, the first thing you shouldn't see is like a burly man, topless, hammering some stuff. And like, why is that always what people think of? Can't you just imagine anyone just getting to work with metal, getting to shape metal, in any way, shape, or form, no matter what size it is, or whether they're producing something that's, a useful object or a sculpture, or, even something that gets thrown into the scrap pile. Like, there shouldn't be so much pressure on me as a female or as a queer person or as a young person or whatever to show up and feel like I have to prove myself, because I'm a hell of a lot better than a lot of those straight white boys out there. But those straight white boys don't feel like that they have to prove themselves because they've got a leg up in the rest of society. They know what they're doing. And me as this like tiny, I'm a skinny young little white dykey girl, like that should be perfectly normal for me to be swinging hammers out there with the best of them. I mean, and that's what queer metal is to me. It's the normalizing of anybody, queer people specifically, but anybody of any minority or any intersection of minorities. Like anybody can do this. Like, to whatever degree, there's natural talent involved, but like you can be bad at this and love it. And like that should be good and normal. And like, why are we all such assholes to each other? That is what queer metal is. Queer metal is, we can all do this and we can all love this, and that's what matters. Not about who's best or who's better or who's, some special whatever token of minorities. Like we share a love of things, and like that's what matters.
Hi, I'm Marcelo Ferreira Gustafsson. I'm sitting in my living room. I'm wearing a black blazer and a turtleneck. And I'm wearing 2 necklaces and earrings. I have a goatee and I'm brown. I am a jeweler, a sculptor, and a mixed media artist, and sometimes I work with text as well. I have a background within a more traditional jewelry making, and then I went on and studied at Konstfack, the University of Arts and Craft in Stockholm, where I got my bachelor and MA degrees from. I would say I work with metal and with jewelry in a very expanded field. I'm not necessarily tied to metal as my main material. I incorporate what I would call matrices or matrix materials like bone, hair, leather, horn. And I pretty much see all my ingredients kind of as a narrative that are connected to myself and the things around me, such as them being more of like a lost in place kind of material that has lost its former kind of self in a way, or its former attachments. To me, queer as a sense of negotiation, it's like a rhythm between comfort and discomfort and acceptance. To me, queer needs to be staged and performed in the sense that it's an ongoing discourse that is constantly in a sort of flux. And to me, the term itself is like a safe space. It's like an agreement where where you can challenge and challenge the order of things. Yeah, it's like a term of freedom for me in a way. To me, it's very clear that queer can be, what's queer to me might not be queer to someone else. It's very context-based. And I think if we look at queer and materialism together, it's very much where is it not, and where could it be, kind of. I sometimes prefer to use the word animalistic or animally to define queer, as it's kind of a bit free from the boundary of physicality. It doesn't have the same physical connotations and direct body attachment. So for me, whenever something acts out of its own orbit or kind of spin around loosely from its own shoulder, it's kind of animalistic, or if you want to call it queer in a way.
I'm a woman. I have dark or dark brown hair. I wear a metal necklace and a green sweatshirt. I'm in my living room, and the light is super soft, and there's plants and couch and living object around me. I'm white and darker skin tone, and I have a blue earring. So I studied jewelry in fashion and object. Actually, that was the name of the program I took. And what got me into it was the name was jewelry, fashion, and accessory design around the body. So the design around the body was what got me interested in doing that. Although I really was interested in jewelry and making things, making small things that work. But my overall interest, or the umbrella of what I'm interested in, is the body and how we relate to object and how we relate to movement, like immigration, like movement of bodies and movement of ideas and movement of materials. I became I think towards the end of my undergrad, I became more interested in different materials. So not using only metals, like incorporating different material, using other materials as a way to tell a story of a specific place or a specific story that of someone, a person, or myself. I studied later in Cranbrook in metal art, the metal art department. And in my work, I don't have the elevator speech ever ready for that, but I think I'm interested in object and the relation to body, as I said, but also to memory and to intimacy we have with things and what they represent and how transformation happens both to the object, but also to the body and to the environment around it and around the object and the body. So it's that, I guess, in a short sentence. And I use metal in my work both as structural. So because I'm using different materials, a lot of the time the metal would be used for connecting or for giving stability, like structure to things, and like can't think of the word that I use, but like the back of the brooch or the mechanism of things, or giving it more durability than other, because I would use a material that is very, very like powder from stone, something that doesn't have body or cannot hold by itself. So metal would give would hold the thing. And I also use metal as the object itself, especially when I'm I'm really interested in keys and chains and things that are carried on the body as kind of like not a jewelry, but they are a jewelry, because we don't think of them as adornment, but they're adorning the body. So I use metal to make things that maybe represent these ideas of carrying a functional tool on the body. Okay, so I talk about queerness for my. I think that maybe the first thing is about trying to question everything. That's maybe the first thing I would say that queerness is for me. Also, I guess realizing my own sexual identity has to do with it, because the first thing you realize is you're not like everyone else, and if you're not like everyone else, then there is another option that no one considered, and then you need to consider it. So I think I was always considering other options that are not the first or the second or the third. So looking for things that are beyond what we see, or not even looking for them, but just not assuming that something is what the first thing I would think it is. In my personal life, I think that's the first thing I see queerness as. But then in relation to that, I also think that for me, I want to think that queerness relates to compassion as well, because the way that I don't want to be assumed as something that I'm not, I also want to have the ability to not assume other things are and other people are and whatever it is. And I want to always think that what I calibrate, what I see, what I perceive as something is just a moment it's a moment in time, and then the next moment would be something else. So it's just, I want to have the compassion to have that within myself and for other people. That's personally how I see queerness. And I think that when I make things, it's also related to that, because it's totally personal, but in my process, I never know what a thing is going to be before I make it. So this, and it's not that I plan for it to be, but it's just like how it is when I start working, or my way of making is not knowing. It's always about the search. And sometimes something comes out of it, and sometimes it takes longer. But the element of not forcing something to be what I decided to be is very, very much central, I guess, or part of how I make things. And I think that relates to queerness. And then with that, being compassionate about like letting things be what they are, letting the material do what it can do, and not forcing something to be what it's not, trying to be, as much as in my perspective, honest with the material. And then a lot of the time what happens in that is that I make jewelry or objects that are not, well, I don't know, they're outside of the societal norms of what I imagine I don't know what kind of people would wear them. So I first make the object, and then I'm saying, okay, so what are the humans that would wear them? Now I can also imagine another kind of human, maybe another community, another interaction. So it's like letting one thing lead and the other thing, and not deciding what these are so rigidly, so firmly. That's a tough question. Not because of metal, I think because everything is queer, and then taking something so specific and trying to like point out what could be queer metal within it is it's hard. But I think what I was thinking when I read it is how our expectation of materials, how they don't meet in many ways, in different ways, or they don't meet, or they are like not necessarily they fail or something, they just perform differently than what we expect them to perform. And I think if I see it in other people's work, I see it in the sense that we would assume metal would have a certain weight and physicality, and then a lot of the time picking up an object that is made out of metal would have a different material, different sense, and I'm interested in that. But actually, what I'm more interested in is how both jewelry, but also objects that we know to be from metal because they need that material property, have maybe they offer another thing than what the function that we would expect them to offer. So I don't know, I've been thinking about this like word affordances lately, and thinking about how there is like this, you think, or you would say that it says that there is the false affordances, like what we would think something happened, but it wouldn't happen, and then it's like a failure. But I actually am interested in the failure of that. So I think maybe queer metal can be an exploration of that, how objects have more or different kind of function than what would we expect them to be, like how it could be in scale. Like I think a lot about spoons because I love making spoons, and they're such a iconic object, and we have such a specific expectation from it, and it relates to the body also, with the shape of like the hand, like in Hebrew, spoon and the palm of the hand is the same word also. So it's like I'm thinking about different changing the performance of the spoon, and that how that can be, how can that look, how can that affect what we think about the object, if the amount that the spoon can hold, that getting to kind of very specific or example, or like, you know, having a double or a triple or a two-sided spoon, or having spoon with holes that cannot hold things. So I guess those are specific, but I'm thinking about different performances from what we are so used to expect a specific performance from. And in metal, it's so like it's in our everyday, the keys, the cutlery, the, you know, the legs of the table, everything has to perform in a specific way. So how can those metal objects perform differently? How can jewelry perform different? Because became this like idea that metal and jewelry are like preciousness and something that lasts forever. So a deterioration of the material of the metal is also something that I can consider queerness, because we expect that to last, to overlast us, and that's a success. Like that would be part of the success of the object, but then it's maybe that's not what matters, or that's just another thing.
Yeah,